For about 5 minutes, we'll start the Ignite talks. He's going to talk to us a little bit about what the Ignite Talks are and what to expect. All right, can you guys hear me? Awesome. All right, so let's have a show of hands. Who here is familiar with Ignite? the format. Okay, we'll go over a brief introduction. So Ignites are a different kind of presentation. Essentially, every speaker here has created 20 slides and given them to me. What I have done is put them in an auto-advance thing. So they don't actually control the slides. I do. And their slides will automatically advance. They only get 15 seconds per slide, for a total of 5 minutes on stage. Once I click the start button, it starts, and there's no turning back at that point. I can't even control the slides, turn them back, or whatever. So that's sort of the Ignite format. These guys have 5 minutes, and gals have 5 minutes to come on stage and to share with you an idea or a story or make an impression. So it's only 5 minutes. You guys should pay attention because it goes by quick. So that's really the Ignite format. One thing we're going to do that's a little different, given everyone is always bittersweet about Ignites. They like being on stage, they like doing them, but it's also a painful format. We're doing an optional thing today. The Ignite speaker, before we actually start the countdown timer, can choose to tell you what they think about Ignites. Or not. That's totally up to them. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce, and give me a second here. So Leon Adato comes to us from SolarWinds, and he's going to talk to us about getting away from it all.
Thank you. So I was supposed to talk about what Ignites mean to me, and I was thinking about this before, and it's really, it's sort of flop sweat and panic blindness bottled up with sheer terror with a side order of what the hell was I thinking? That's sort of, for anyone who's thinking about it, that's my absolute, recommendation, right? So there we go. Okay? For the next 5 minutes, I dare you, put down your phones, close your laptops, set aside your tablets. I double dog dare you. In fact, I have a table full of swag back there that says that you can't just listen to me for the next 5 minutes, free from the bondage of beeps and tweets and pings. I triple dog dare you. Now, separating ourselves from our devices and the internet is not a new topic, but you have to appreciate how fast we've gotten here. Less than a decade ago, the iPhone, the original iPhone, was debuted. Today, over 2/3 of all Americans own a smartphone. Now, even if we can't quote the facts and figures, we're not surprised about the information. We're not confused when we read stories about how people feel worse about their lives after going on Facebook, or that screen usage is associated with signs of sleep deprivation or even depression. So we're also not surprised about what these devices are pulling us away from. Life. Josh Becker recently said, life at its best is happening right in front of you. These experiences will never repeat themselves. These conversations are unfiltered and authentic. But this talk is not about how bad it is to be on the internet, because I spend my entire life tethered to a laptop, so that would be disingenuous. Instead, I want to talk about how disconnecting some time for some amount of time is helpful to our lives, both online and off. Now, you may have read stories about people who take a data diet or a technology cleanse as if the packets could get clogged up in the colon of your brain and ew. Anyway, you may have wondered what kind of crazy wingnut does something like that. Well, I belong to a secret society of crazy wingnuts who do this every week. We call this idea Shabbat, right? Now, before you worry, Judaism does not go for the whole conversion thing. I'm not going to ask you to join the tribe. I'm also not going to try to sell you Amway. Now, on Shabbat, anything with an on switch is off limits, which is great, but if I'm not going to try to ask you to be Jewish, what am I doing here? Well, for 30 years, I've been in IT. And I have disconnected every single week, so I have some ideas. Like everything in IT, having a plan is the key. Let's say that you plan to turn off everything that connects to the outside world, including the radio. Great! What about CDs? And if CDs, what about streaming audio? And if streaming audio, what about podcast? The point is, don't try to have a perfect plan. Simply have a plan, be flexible, and adjust. Also plan to communicate with just a couple of key friends and coworkers that you will be out of data and cell range. That's exactly the phrase to use. Do not tell them that you are taking an offline day. They will troll you until you get back. Also, when you come back on, do the opposite. Don't tell anybody. They'll figure out you're back online, trust me. Also, how do you plan how long to be online and for how often. The reality is, as often and as long as you feel is good. The point is to experience the benefits and build the habit of disconnecting regularly, not to fit into a one-size-fits-most specification. Now, also, you want to plan for coming back on, because if coming back online means 5 hours of slogging through email, all your hard-won rest and relaxation is going to go out the window. Also plan mentally. I have a friend who's an artist. He goes offline every single week, and to do that, he has to exhaust himself creatively all week long so that he's not pulling his hair out, going bonkers about the things he can't do on his offline day. That made me rethink my workload priorities. It also made me rethink notifications, or as they're more appropriately called, interruptions. Try this for a week. Just look at the ways, yes, thank you. Try this for a week. See how often you are interrupted or you notified about emergencies, and if they really were emergencies. Odds are they weren't. Now that takes me to the biggest interruption of all, outages. Despite their claims of supporting work-life balance, your company is going to throw that out the window if the online ordering system goes offline. Well, and they don't care if you're having your me time. Okay, so what do? Spoiler alert, do whatever it takes to keep a steady paycheck. Then go back and look at that plan, be flexible, and adjust. Now that takes me to on-call. I've had managers who've supported my religious needs. I've also had managers who looked me in the eye and told me my religion was my problem to solve. Here's what I learned. Figuring out on-call with offline is going to happen between you and your team, not your manager, not HR, because everybody hates their on-call schedule and they want more options, and you, my friends, you represent those options. Simply offering people to take a week of their on-call in exchange for an equal number of days is immensely powerful. Now, what about perception? If you start going offline, are people going to think that you're slacking off? Reality is, the response I get most often is, man, I wish I could do that. And if you follow my suggestions about prioritization and communication, you will have done more than most IT pros do when they walk out the door. Now, the choice is yours. If you made it this far without checking those interruptions, you have my heartfelt gratitude as well as my sincere respect. And if you didn't, you may want to think about that and see if you're okay with it. Thank you very much.
Leon, that was amazing. All right, up next, I should be better prepared for this. Up next is Renee Long, who comes to us from PagerDuty. She's a software engineer there, and she's going to talk to us about the flat track to DevOps.
All right, so I guess for me, Ignite Talks would be, as I'm about to tell you, self-inflicted garbage fire, which is basically what I do in my spare time. All right, so I guess let's get this started. So my heart rate is skyrocketing. I'm getting awkwardly sweaty, and my mind is racing, but is also blank. And somehow, time has slowed down, but is also sped up. I'm shaking with adrenaline, and all of this happens in the split second before I miraculously pull it together to avoid just totally losing my shit. So if you've played roller derby or remember getting your first page, you probably know exactly the feeling that I'm talking about. Which brings me to the subject of my talk today, how roller derby has helped me understand DevOps better, and how DevOps has made me a better roller derby skater. So roller derby or women's flat track roller derby, is a full contact sport played on roller skates. Each team fields a jammer and 4 blockers, and the jammer, who's wearing the star on her head, scores points by lapping a pack comprised of blockers from both teams. Now, attitudes towards what make a good roller derby team or a great roller derby team have changed a lot over the years. I mean, it used to be just take the best 20 skaters that are around. It's an obvious choice. But over the years, the strategy has changed such that if teams don't work together, if they're not working as a cohesive unit, they're just going to get totally shredded by the opposition. After all, great teams are built around relationships and not rockstar ninjas. But from what I've learned about working at PagerDuty, it takes a diverse group of talents, perspectives, and people to make something that's truly agile and adaptive. The best teams adapt to quickly changing contexts and focus on more on the collective achievements rather than hoping that individual successes add up to a win. So as all of us here know, making software can feel like you're managing a billion different parts that are all on fire while you're riding a bike blindfolded, and continuous delivery isn't even the new hotness anymore. It's basically an expectation, and and moving fast only adds to the expectation that we're going to move faster. And similarly, roller derby is a constantly evolving game that, unfortunately for me, has turned into something more than just turning left really quickly. So the unexciting part of my job was going on call for the very first time and being introduced to this thing called DevOps. I was always interested in systems infrastructure, but for me it was a deep pool of mystery and legend, and I was never really quite sure what was going on. But at PagerDuty, we believe that the fastest way to improve software quality is to make the engineers that made it responsible for it. So throwing my steaming pile of code and hoping someone in ops would catch it wasn't even an option anymore. But being a jammer, I'm the one that's wearing the star. Going on call for services, the pressure wasn't anything new. When I'm wearing the star, I'm scoring the points. My team's counting on me. When I'm on call, I'm the first point of contact when things go on fire, so I better know what to do. But going on call for my team services has forced me to learn a lot of new things, to actually figure out what those Datadog graphs mean. But when I say team, I really mean team, because being a team member is part of being a team member is realizing there are a lot of jobs to do, and doing all of them by yourself is probably the worst idea ever. So one part of roller derby that's confusing for new spectators is this idea of passing the star. If the jammer is having a hard time scoring points, she has the option to pass on that role to one of her teammates. Now, some people can see this as an indication of weakness or vulnerability, but now I understand it as just another aspect of working together. Sometimes the best thing you can do as a teammate is realize when to ask for help and pass the star. So part of a solid team dynamic is this sense of trust between team members, that asking for help isn't going to be seen as incompetence. It's really just going to be interpreted as appreciating someone else's expertise and prioritizing getting shit done over personal glory. And now, aside from just the business arguments for DevOps are some of the same reasons why I played roller derby for 7 years. It's a culture that brings people together. It breaks down barriers that really shouldn't be there in the first place at all. And one thing, when ops and devs work together, you get more than better process and profitable software. You cultivate a shared understanding that we're all in this together, and that your colleagues are people, not jobs, and that no one's going to score all the points by themselves. Thanks.
All right, so next we have Alan Kraft, who is an IT specialist at the USPTO, and he's going to talk to us about hacking the A3.
Oh, so turn it on. Okay, good. Good thing you gave us a little time here. So one of the things that I really love about A3s is that they get a lot of ideas out at a DevOps phase just before the open spaces. And I think that makes for really wonderful open spaces. So I actually wrote this Ignite talk with that specifically in mind. I believe that A3 is a really powerful tool for DevOps, particularly if it's adapted to suit the needs of your own team. So what I'm going to do is go through a very quick description of DevOps, some adaptations, and provide a lot of sources for those interested in a deeper dive. One of the best sources is Ben Rockwood's DevOps Day Seattle 2016 talk, The Power of A3 in Action. Ben called A3 the engine of Lean, the secret of Kaizen, and the key to the learning organization. Those are things I want, so I want A3 in my toolbox. If you watch Ben's talk, you may find that you want that too. At the core of A3 is the teaching of Schuhart and Deming, the plan, do, study, act cycle. Deming took those ideas to Toyota, and then Toyota's challenge became, how do we make that actionable by every person in the organization, getting them to plan out experiments and then adapt to what's learned from those experiments and repeat the cycle. There are some pitfalls to avoid. Don't make big A3s. Break them down into the smallest reasonable piece. Don't treat it like a bureaucratic piece of paperwork. It's a guide to the logical thinking process. John Shook said that a good A3 is a reflection of the dialogue that created it. And one of the things that Ben brought out in his talk was the philosophy of pragmatism, which teaches that we learn whether something is correct, a method is correct in our environment by its actual application and the success of that application. He pulled design thinking into a variant of A3 in his organization that he calls A3.2. If you look at his talk, you can see the value that his team got out of that approach. If you find this a provocative statement, check out the blog post by John Allspaw. After reading John's arguments in there, I decided to drop root cause for a more flexible problem analysis in my A3. Another influence was the Food Fight Show design thinking episode. And it was described there that design is changing existing conditions into preferred ones. So I brought that into my current A3, where existing conditions and problem analysis then feeds a definition of the preferred condition, plan for experiments, and the follow-up is the completion of the study and act of the PDSA cycle. So David Snowden's Cynefin framework has gotten a lot of traction and interest in the DevOps community, and I think it has some interesting implications for A3. One of the things that we find is he talks about how in the complex domain, it's necessary to run multiple safe-to-fail experiments, and I think A3 is actually an excellent way to organize those multiple safe-to-fail experiments. So with all of this flexibility, how do you tell if an A3 practice has actually drifted away from its roots and isn't really A3 anymore? Jacob Adams did an excellent keynote at ChefConf in 2015. It's in the links. And he talked about DevOps Kung Fu. And he described that we could recognize people who were practicing DevOps because there was a common set of basic philosophy and commonly used forms, even though our application was unique to each practitioner. And I think the same thing applies to A3. And I've got links to that talk. It's an excellent talk. So some of the things that I'm looking to pursue next are the kind of things that could be done with what flows into an A3. So things like postmortems or learning reviews, new initiatives, project plans, and then also what flows out of an A3. I'm interested in experimenting with automated information radiators as an analogy to the original physical wall of A3s that were in Toyota's factories. So hopefully you found this thought-provoking. These references are out there and online if you want a deeper dive into A3 thinking. I'm interested in your thoughts, so if this is of interest to you, please come talk to me. Thanks a lot, and thanks to the organizers of DevOps Days Baltimore. This is a wonderful conference.
And so, now coming to talk to us about best practices for IT management, investment-based budgeting, is Eli Center, who is president at 4S Silver Sword.